So let's share screen. Here it is. Right. And please let me know if you can move the screen with the camera on it as well. So if you need to move that, just let us know. Sorry, just feel free to move that. Cool. So my name is Megan, and I work for Family Services Australia. I've also worked in quite a few different organisations, including with suicide prevention and suicide risk de-escalation for Grand Pacific Health. So I know a little bit about this subject. So that's kind of a bit of my experience. I'm a registered psychologist, have been for about 5 years now. So yeah, it's a bit about me. So it's going to work. There we go. So just before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the country on which we are meeting today. So obviously we might be all meeting in different sort of parts of it, but I'm meeting on Wadi Wadi land, and wish to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and that sovereignty was never ceded. I also just want to spend some time acknowledging what's been going on in our community at the moment. There has been a significant amount of grief and loss recently, and I'd like to acknowledge those who have directly and indirectly been affected by suicide and how devastating the impact of suicide is on everyone in the community. And if you find yourself at any time that you're struggling or with anything that I'm kind of saying or that's kind of coming up, please refer to, it says the handout that's emailed to you, but I will pop it in the chat in our, actually I might do that now. So there's just a little bit of a handout with some numbers and some so with some numbers and some other things on it. So what I'll do is see if I can send it to you guys. Where is it? Maybe if I do it in the chat. Yeah, there we go, attachment. Okay, cool. So now you guys should have access to that handout. All right, back to this. Alrighty. So our agenda for today is we'll first of all start talking about understanding suicidal thoughts. Can you guys still see my screen? I'm still sharing. Okay, no, still sharing, cool. Where did I go? Back. Yeah, so our agenda is understanding suicidal thoughts and self-harming behaviour, identifying warning signs of suicide and what might kind of be something that indicates that someone is at risk. Then we'll kind of break for questions. Then we'll go into how to support someone who's having kind of suicidal thoughts or self-harming, where to get support from, and then also just how we look after ourselves, because this stuff is quite heavy. So let's start with self-harming. So, oh, what have I done? Okay, so self-harming. So when we talk about self-harm, we mean the act that someone is deliberately hurting themselves. It can include things like scratching, burning, cutting, pulling your hair, hitting things like walls or objects. The most common thing that we talk about when we talk about self-harm is cutting. And so then we're also going to talk about it in a couple of different levels, because there is a couple of different things about self-harm. So there's, I guess you can have quite superficial, especially kind of cuts or like, so that might be like scratching or So that sort of thing where there's not actually broken skin. Then we would move into non-medical attention, which is when the cut or the wound might bleed. There may be broken skin, that sort of thing, but there wouldn't need to be medical attention for what for the injury. And then level 3 would be medical attention. So deep cuts that continue to bleed. If something's continuing to bleed after, say, 10 to 15 minutes, then that's probably something that's going to need to be stitched up. Or if it's kind of spurting blood, that's an immediate needing to go to the hospital because they probably hit an artery. So that's why we have that one. Okay. So then we go to why do people self-harm? So there's lots of reasons that people kind of self-harm. And what we know is that in the brain, what it does is releases endorphins and endocannabinoids. That's a hard word to say. But what that means is it releases this kind of rush of good feeling when people self-harm. And so they're intentionally injuring themselves, and this can have a kind of soothing effect on them, or just kind of numbs them or changes the feeling that they might be having otherwise. So what kind of the research is suggesting is that people that do self-harm, and it seems to be particularly present in like kind of younger people, is the reason that they might do that is they have a lower like dopamine level or endorphin level naturally. So then when they self-harm, they get a kind of a booster of this sort of happy chemicals and makes them feel kind of more normal. So I do have a little bit of a clip on this. So this young lady has been self-harming for a while, and she talks about her kind of experience with that. There we go. Okay. So
did that work? I couldn't see it.
Oh, you couldn't see it?
No.
Could anyone else see it? Oh no.
Yeah, there was nothing here either.
Oh, okay. I'll try again. If not, I might need to just. Could you hear what she was saying?
No, no sound.
Okay. Let me try again. Stop sharing. Start sharing. Can you guys see it now?
Yeah, can see it now.
Ah, perfect. All right, lovely. Oh, sorry about that.
No, I don't think I've got sound.
So Debbie, you can see it, but you can't hear it.
Yeah, that's right.
Can anybody else see it but not hear it?
Yeah, that's correct. I can't. There's no audio. I've only got a picture.
That's really unusual. I don't know what's going on. I'm sharing again. Can anyone hear it now?
No.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll put the YouTube clips in the chat boxes. I don't know why that's not working. What it does is it talks about her experience with self-harming and how she felt a release when she first kind of did it. And then it goes on to talk about like the kind of adrenaline rush that she experienced, and that she feels that that's why people can kind of become addicted to self-harming, because it gives them these kind of positive chemicals and positive releases. All right. Oh, that's a bit of a bummer. But yeah, so that's what she kind of talks about in that one. Go back to the PowerPoint. All right. Kirsten just asked if you want to watch it. It might be worth like looking at maybe afterwards, unless people have a burning desire to do that right now. Up to you guys. It's only about the first minute of it that I was going to show you.
I'm happy to try and catch up later.
Sure. There is one I might get you to look at, but we might leave that one for the moment. All right, lovely. Cool. Alrighty, let's jump back into it then. So self-harming, how common is it? So what the research suggests, so this is from Lifeline in 2020 in July. So it's pretty recent statistics that about 1% of Australians have self-harmed in the last month. And about 8% of people have done that over their lifetime, which equates to about 250,000 people, which is quite a lot of people that have self-harmed in the last month. So why do it? So the main kind of things that come up regularly when you talk to people about why they're self-harming is to improve their mood, just to kind of get out of their head, to feel like they get really trapped in the thoughts that are kind of coming up or the things that they're thinking about. It's probably why we see it more commonly in younger people as well, because they have less ability to kind of problem solve and less ability to maybe do something different to kind of distract themselves or to kind of make themselves feel better. It can be in any suicide measure, so which is one of the reasons that if someone is self-harming, we don't automatically necessarily try to stop that straight away. We definitely try to understand why they're doing that, but a lot of people will say that the suicidal thoughts kind of build in their head, and then when they self-harm, it kind of just gives them a bit of relief from that for a little while. So self-punishment can also be a common one, where they feel guilty or sad or bad about something that has happened, or shame or guilt. And it's a way of, I guess, confirming that, like, or punishing themselves for whatever they feel they have done. So it can also be the flip side, where so those, I guess, are really strong kind of feelings, and this is the flip side where they feel kind of numb, and they feel like there's nothing kind of going on, and they have no connection to their body. So self-harming can kind of help them feel more engaged with themselves or make them feel something, which is sometimes better than feeling nothing. And occasionally it can be to communicate to others that they're having a really hard time. So some of the common myths that I might talk to that people kind of think, especially young people, use. So they'll do it for peer bonding. So a friend's doing it, so I'm doing it. It's very rarely the case. It might have been suggested to them by a friend, but as I'm sure you can imagine, you wouldn't probably continue to do something unless you felt it had some benefit to you. So sometimes people might try things because their friends or other people are doing it or have suggested it. But if they didn't get some benefit out of it, they certainly wouldn't continue to do that. And a lot of the time, I think it's just now it's a very like an awareness thing. Lots of young people know that this is what people do. And this is what can be helpful. So it's less a peer bonding sort of thing than a way of managing distress or like emotions and that sort of thing. So attention seeking. So a lot of the time, and that lady talks about it in her in that video clip that I've sent you guys, she spent 5 years hiding the fact that she self-harmed. And nowadays a lot of young people will, or people that do self-harm will hide them. They'll maybe cut on their upper thighs or on their lower abdomen or somewhere where people don't generally see them. And that would be more so for that, for those other reasons. Sometimes it is to communicate pain and communicate that they're not okay to people, but it's not necessarily the case, and that's less common. That people that self-harm have serious mental health also can be the case, but sometimes it, like I said, especially in like sort of teenagers, and we know that the average age of people starting to self-harm is 12 to 14, they actually don't have good problem-solving skills, and they're not particularly well adapted at that time to come up with different strategies or to even kind of have the ability to understand what's kind of going on. So this can carry through into adulthood because it becomes sort of a coping strategy because they don't have anything else. And that someone who self-harms is trying to end their life. So like I spoke about before, it's normally the opposite reason. Not everybody that self-harms either is suicidal. It can be for lots of different reasons. But if most people that are self-harming, that isn't their intention to end their lives, it is always, of course, good to kind of ask questions about that, because there has been especially like some media representations of people ending their lives through cutting. So it's always a good thing to kind of ask about. But we'll kind of go into that a little bit more in a little bit. Okay, so I was going to show you another kind of YouTube about suicide in the brain. But what I'll do is I might talk through this slide first, and then I'll maybe send you guys the link. And then if you can just spend the, I think if we stop at like about 3 minutes, that's probably a pretty good measure of this kind of like the link, and it kind of talks about how like suicidal thoughts work in the brain, and I think it's pretty useful. So I'll try and share it on my screen, but I don't know that you guys will be able to kind of see it or hear it. So when we talk about suicidal thoughts, we talk about, I guess it's more the thoughts or the ideas about having that. And then suicidal behaviours is the actions and people that are acting on those suicidal thoughts. Also just want to point out that we don't use the word commit. That kind of goes back to when we were, when it was illegal to attempt to end your life. And it has a pretty negative kind of connotation and like this legal implication that kind of continues to add to the stigma. So it's something that we try to kind of step away from using that word particularly. It's pretty unhelpful when we're talking about this. We don't want to kind of add to any shame or guilt that people might be feeling. So that's something that we just try to be mindful of. So what I'll do is, before I talk through the rest of it, I'll send you the YouTube. So if I pop it in here, what you should be able to do in theory is click on it. Yeah, and it should load up. And then if you just watch it to, I think 2 minutes and 55 seconds was about what I would do. I'll try and share my screen again, but whether that'll work, I don't know. If it doesn't, then feel free to just maybe jump on and watch it yourself. Can anybody see it or hear it?
I saw the graphic come up.
Okay, but wouldn't hear
Got
it?
video, but got no
No
sound.
sound yet.
Okay, sure. I don't know how to fix the sound, so maybe if I can just get you guys to click on the link in the chat. So does everyone know how to do that?
I'm not sure. Is that just the bar at the top with the YouTube link?
Oh, that's my screen. Sorry, I'll stop sharing. And so then if you go to, oh, actually, okay. So there's a little, I'll go back to sharing and I'll show you. No, I want to share this. Can you still see the screen? So there's a little chat box here. And if you click on that, there's a link there.
So Megan, you can actually activate the sound by going up. If you hover over the top, it'll give you a black bar, like kind of a see-through black bar at the top.
Oh.
When you share, and you've got to activate the sound for the video if you're sharing a video all of the time. So you can either do it first by when you share your screen at the bottom where you pick which screen you're going to share.
Yep.
Or if you're already playing the video, if you hover up the top, you can then activate. It says, I can't even, it just come up for you just then. If you share your screen again, I can. But you always, if you're sharing videos on YouTube, you always have to activate.
Aha. Okay.
So you.
Is that sharing now? I think I did that. Can you let me know if...
Often described as simply a chemical.
Oh, good.
Beautiful.
Ah, perfect. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you so much. I did see that and then I missed it. Thank you. I'm glad some people know more about technology than I do.
So yeah, if you when you're sharing the screen, you can do it, but if you forget, you can do hover over up the top and just click that. I think it's, I don't know, microphone or whatever.
Beautiful. Well, actually, I'll go back and show you guys this one then as well. Can you all hear it?
During that time when you were
Yes.
self-harming, what were you doing?
Mostly cutting, but also scratching, overdoses, anything I could do really.
Why were you doing it?
Well, I mean, I started when I was 14 and it kind of started by accident. And what I found was the first time I did it, I got a release from it. And it very quickly became a very negative coping mechanism for me.
Did you felt better after? That's what you mean by
Yeah,
release
it's very
mechanism?
counterintuitive, isn't it?
Well, I imagine it's painful,
Yeah.
but afterwards you feel better.
And also you get a certain adrenaline release when you self-harm. So I think a lot of people get quite addicted to that sensation as well.
Did you want people to know you were self-harming?
No, I hid it for the first 5 years, which is no mean feat. And, you know, it took me 5 years to kind of come out of the closet about mental health problems. So it was a really big deal to kind of tell people for the first time.
You were cutting on your...
Okay, so that was that one that I wanted to show you guys. And this is the one on suicide in the brain.
With over 350 million people affected by depression worldwide, it's no doubt an incredibly real and serious issue. But what exactly is going on inside of a depressed person? Is there a biological basis for these intense feelings of sadness? In the past, depression was often described as simply a chemical imbalance in the brain. Specifically, scientists believed that a lack of the neurotransmitter serotonin was to blame, which is often referred to as the feel-good chemical. However, the only real evidence for this was that when some depressed people were prescribed drugs which increased serotonin levels, it helped alleviate their symptoms. But while chemicals most certainly are involved, this view doesn't really capture just how complex depression is. In recent years, scientists began to notice that the brain cell growth and connections may actually play a larger role. When we look at the brain of a depressed person, studies show that the hippocampus tends to be much smaller than average. Other areas of the brain are also physically affected, but this region in particular controls memory and emotion. And the longer a person has been depressed, the smaller the hippocampus becomes. The cells and networks literally deteriorate. It turns out that stress may actually be a main trigger in the decrease of new neurons in this area of the brain. In fact, studies have shown that when this region of the brain is regenerated and new neurons are stimulated, mood improves. Interestingly, many modern drugs, including those which affect serotonin levels, have an indirect effect on the growth of brain cells. This is likely why serotonin-based drugs seem to help some patients, but not for the reasons we once thought. Instead, they promote the release of other chemicals which ultimately stimulate neurogenesis, or the growth of new neurons. Knowing this, some scientists now believe focus should be on drugs which directly affect neurogenesis. But while your neurons and chemicals may be the direct influencers, many genetic factors have been discovered as well. One particular study found that a variation in the serotonin transporter gene leaves individuals more vulnerable to depression. Every individual has 2 copies of the gene, one from each parent, and this gene can either be short or long. After tracking 800 young adults over 5 years, the study revealed that 33% of individuals with one short version became depressed after stressful life events, and people with 2 short genes fared even worse. On the other hand, those with 2 long genes were much less likely to become depressed with similar life stress. Many other genes have been identified which increase the likelihood of depression too, and it makes sense when you consider that depression and bipolar disorder both run in families. Studies of identical twins show that if one has bipolar disorder, the other has a 60 to 80% chance of developing it too. So while the true cause or causes of depression have yet to be pinned down precisely, and trust us, there's a huge list of other variables that studies suggest may come into play, it's important to remember that depression is a disease with a biological basis, along with psychological and social implications. It's not simply a weakness that somebody should get over, or even something that we have a say in. And just like heart disease or cancer, shedding light onto the subject is of the utmost importance in order to bring funding and proper research. But
Okay, so that wasn't suicide in the brain, that was depression in the brain. But it gives you guys hopefully a bit of an idea about what happens within the brain and how they think some of this stuff is actually playing out, and it's not all about individuals and how they're kind of going. It's also literally in their brain and how their brain chemical is working, and how their emotions and other things are being affected by what is happening for them and stressful life events and all of those sorts of things. Okay, so when we talk about kind of suicidal thoughts, or I guess the continuation from like kind of being sad to someone who might end their life, is I've kind of broken it down into levels to hopefully make it a little bit more understandable. So level 1 is kind of feeling sad, down, or depressed. So this could look at like someone kind of struggling to get out of bed, or not taking interest in things that they used to, sleeping a lot more, eating a lot more or less, sleeping a lot less as well can kind of go into that as well. Maybe like feeling a bit useless, or hopeless, or that they can't kind of, or that there might be a burden on other people. Then we would move into kind of level 2, which is having passive thoughts of suicide. So by that we mean someone kind of having things like, I'm a bit over it, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to be alive, normally kind of feeling stressed and anxious, or like sad and down, depressed, that sort of thing. And then we would kind of move into level 3, which is active thoughts of suicide. By active, I mean, I guess that's when we're starting to move towards more wanting to end your life. So in level 2, while you might be having those thoughts, that person would probably quite quickly dismiss that, or that might be a flag to be like, oh no, I'm not having a very good time, I need to do something about this. Whereas active thoughts would be more like, I'm really done with this, I'm over it, I really don't want to be alive, but then also kind of moving towards starting to plan. So the planning kind of in this would maybe be having some idea about how they would like to end their life, what they might use, maybe when, but no immediacy to that, no, or maybe kind of vague sort of plans where they haven't actually pinned down details and or made a solid plan around when and how and they would end their lives. Whereas level 4 is active planning. So by that, we mean that they're actually started to get ready to end their lives. They have a means to end their life. They might have, I guess they're more in the final stages of that planning, and they're more ready or organised if they were to end their life. They might have a specific date in mind. All of those kinds of things. There's normally kind of more detail in that level there. And then suicidal behaviours is when someone actually attempts or completes suicide. So who has suicidal thoughts? So these are a little bit old, but they're the most recent statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. The next census stuff hasn't kind of come out yet. So over 65,000 people make attempts. We don't know how many people have suicidal thoughts every year. Sorry. Oh, I think someone dropped out. Okay. So we don't know how many people have suicidal thoughts every year, but it's likely to be significantly higher than the people that make attempts. Like I said, those people that I guess are in maybe those lower levels, like 2 or 3 maybe, that then decide that they really want to get some help or start doing other proactive things that kind of help them, or the thing that's stressing them out or that has been like contributing to that maybe resolves itself or whatever it might be, and so then they might not move into making an attempt. In 2018, just over 3,000 people ended their lives. And when it says approximately 105,730 years of potential life loss in 2018, they work out kind of based on, I don't know if they have a specific life expectancy, but they kind of work out on how long those people might have lived for, and then kind of deduct it from their age that they passed away. And that's how they work out that kind of figure, which is a pretty significant amount of life that people could have lived. So it's something that kind of affects the vast majority of us. So about 1 in 3 people have been close to someone who they have known that's died by suicide. And it's the leading cause of death for Australians between the ages of 15 and 44. And if you're a young Australian, you're more likely to take your own life than you are to die in a car accident. And there's a significant discrepancy in the people that do end their lives. It's about 3/4 male. And if you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, you have an increased likelihood of double that of non-Indigenous Australians. Okay, so now I'm going to go into talking about some of the kind of warning signs that we can kind of see when someone might be feeling suicidal. So firstly, I'll talk about groups that are at risk. So there's lots of different ones on here. Lots of kind of social factors that can lead into people feeling suicidal or having a really hard time. So people with mental health problems or substance use, people who...
Megan,
Yep.
We're not seeing any slides, so it's still the YouTube. So are there slides to go with these conversations?
Oh, yep. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
So this is the slide that we were on when we moved through. So these are the levels that I was talking about. I can move that over. So level 1, feeling sad, down and depressed. Level 2, having passive thoughts of suicide. Level 3, active thoughts of suicide. Level 4, active planning. And level 5, suicidal behaviours. This is that page on statistics that I just kind of went through. And then we just moved into warning signs. Okay, so people who have a high pain tolerance might be more likely to attempt suicide or be less afraid of death. So people with family histories of suicide or other kind of like mental health or substance abuse issues, if the person has a history of being abused in some way, shape or form, or of trauma, someone who is socially isolated and distance from their like social groups, or don't have a particularly good social group, or like family relationships, that sort of thing, like unemployment. So again, that connection to people is really quite important. So people that don't feel particularly well connected to people are more likely to feel suicidal. And having a breakup, being rejected by people that you're really close to, those sorts of things can all kind of lead into it. That they're not necessarily guaranteed that that person might be feeling suicidal, but they're just kind of things that we try to look out for. And the main one that we really look out for is previous suicide attempts. So the reason this is such a big deal is that we know that the more attempts people make, the more likely they are to be successful in their attempt. So it's a good thing to kind of be aware of, especially if some of these social things might be happening for someone that we know has previously attempted. Okay, so then we move into some of the signs that you might see. So physical changes, so loss of energy, loss of interest in maintaining their appearance or personal hygiene, changes in their sleeping pattern, so too much or too little, not being interested in sex, sudden and extreme changes in eating habits. So if they start losing a lot of weight, or if they start gaining a lot of weight, or eating more or less, and an increase in minor illnesses. So this can kind of go across any of the stages. It's not specific to someone that is feeling suicidal. It could just be someone that's kind of feeling sad and down, but it's kind of a marker that we would like to kind of, I guess, flag if we're noticing these things happening, or especially if it's a significant change from what we would normally see for that person. So behaviours, so I guess crying or being really emotional, or having like not a lot of control over their emotions. So we know, for instance, males might not be visibly sad, but they might be a lot more cranky for no kind of reason. Getting really angry really quickly can be a kind of an example of that. Starting to increase their drug and alcohol use, starting to do risky things, like driving recklessly is an example on there, or doing things that are uncharacteristically risky for them. It could be making like inappropriate financial decisions, those sorts of things that for someone that's normally quite reserved and wouldn't do those things. So a big one, withdrawing from family and friends, not doing things that they used to like, prior suicidal behaviours and self-harming. So all of those ones can fall into any of them, but the ones that we would kind of specifically want to look out for is putting affairs in order, so giving away possessions, especially ones that they really love and prize, or that have some significance to them. that's a pretty big flag. And if we notice, or if we're finding suicide notes or letters saying goodbye to people, or even people going around, maybe not writing it, but going around and saying goodbye in a way that doesn't quite make sense, that would be a flag that that person has maybe moved into those later stages of planning. Conversations, so some of the ones that we've already kind of talked about. So I can't take this anymore. What's the point? Nothing's ever going to change. Nothing's ever going to get better. The kind of guilt sort of thoughts. Feeling alone, we've talked about as well. Feeling damaged, like there's no way that anything could ever get better, and that no one maybe would love them again, or something like that. And feeling helpless, like that real inability to be able to problem solve and feel like you can make a difference. And then again, moving into, so again, that can be any of the stages, but the last kind of two, again, the planning or the active behaviours would be talking about death or suicide and planning for suicide. So people will often make jokes, and make a lot of jokes about suicide, or oh, I should just kill myself, or those sorts of things, and they're pretty big warning signs for us that that person isn't doing very well, even if they then go, oh no, I'm just joking. It would be worth kind of having a conversation about that with that, like further with that person. So feelings, so sadness and depression, anger and shame. Worthlessness can be a pretty big one to kind of watch out for, feeling disconnected and feeling kind of hopeless. Cool. So what I'll do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a little bit, and then does anyone have any kind of questions at the moment on anything that I've said, or anything that didn't make sense, or anything that you'd like to know a little bit more about? Yep, definitely. If you do want a copy of the slides, feel free to just email me and I will send them back to you. Did anyone else have any questions or anything? If so, maybe either type them in or raise your hand, or we'll kind of get back into it. So Nicole just asked if someone draws on themselves a lot, is this a potential indicator of self-harm? I think it really depends. So probably depends on the person and why they're doing it. Teenagers, when they're bored, seem to draw on their arms a lot or just draw on themselves a lot. I guess it depends what they're drawing and what they're doing. But if it's something that you're kind of worried about, it might be worth asking them and just kind of asking, why do you draw on yourself and what is that about? And if you're noticing some of those other changes that we've talked about before, that's probably a good time to kind of ask them about, even if they say, oh no, I just like drawing on myself, or I'm actually a bit worried because of these reasons. Have you ever thought about self-harming and that sort of thing? It's a good question though. Cool. So, and then Katrina asked, is there something we can give to our loved ones to use that gives the same result of self-harm that is not dangerous? Good question. So there is things like holding ice that can kind of help. It still kind of gives pain and can release those endorphins, but won't do like doesn't do any physical damage, because it obviously melts. Or you can use elastic bands, and just kind of, I guess, snapping it can kind of gives that like a little bit of pain, but doesn't do any damage again. That being, like, it's good things to kind of try, whether the person's willing to do that or not. Again, it kind of comes down to what is the purpose of them doing it. So if they're self-harming for sometimes people will report that they like watching, like I think it's this real mindfulness and being present. So then that can kind of help. Or sometimes like people really like, I just need to see the blood. I don't know why, but it's just a thing that they do. It's definitely things to suggest, but whether it works for them or not is another matter. But they can be good things to try. So I think it's also, so one of the reasons we try not to get people to just lock things away, and to just kind of remove all sharps, that can be a good solution. But we really need to understand why they're self-harming in the first place. So as I spoke about, it can be an anti-suicide kind of thing where they're self-harming to stop themselves feeling suicidal and to kind of get rid of those thoughts. So that can really ramp up if we just stop, like if we just take away the things that they're using to kind of help manage. So if you're thinking about it as managing emotions, if we don't put anything else in place, that can cause a lot more distress, which can then make a lot of further issues. But definitely, like, if you know that they are self-harming, hopefully they'll be willing to kind of engage with therapy as well. So that can be a good thing to kind of try and get someone involved with as well, if they're not already. And depending on, but it's also good just to have those conversations. So if they're saying they really want to stop and they really don't want to be doing it anymore, and you really want to be building their capacity, excellent. But being mindful of trying to put other things in place for that as well, like helpful activities or people they can talk to, or those kinds of things, if that hopefully makes sense. Cool. Does anyone else have any other questions? No, not at the moment. All right, great. We will have, I'll get you guys another kind of time at the end to ask more questions. Cool. All right. So now we'll go into supporting someone who isn't doing very well. Alrighty. I'm going to start with a YouTube video. Can I be pro at the end of this, but knowing how to use
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, "I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me." Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay, so what that talks about is this really lovely way of, I guess, demonstrating what we'd all like to be able to do when someone's having a hard time. One of the worst things you can ever do, and I'm sure teenagers tell you this all the time if you've had any interactions with them, is if you say something to them, they'll automatically like you're trying to solve their problems and they'll get cranky about it, because that's how we all feel. None of us want to have someone to fix our problems for us necessarily, and it normally feels like you're not being listened to. So when someone goes straight into problem solving, which makes complete sense, you want to help, you don't want them to be feeling this way. It's really uncomfortable for us to hear that people are doing badly, and we love and care about them, and we don't want them to be doing badly, so we want to fix it. Makes complete sense. But what does that communicate to other people? It normally communicates things like, it might communicate that they feel like you don't care because you're just kind of ignoring what they're saying and going straight into, oh, well, like, let's just go outside and play, or let's just go and do stuff, or you just need to get out of bed and you'll be fine. And we're not meaning this to come from a bad place. We're meaning this to come from I'm really worried about you and I want you to get up and get out of bed. But that isn't normally what's communicated to that person that's having a really hard time. And so what that talks about is connection. And like I've mentioned quite a few times now, people will feel suicidal, or things that definitely lead into suicidal is that lack of connection, feeling lonely, feeling like a burden, feeling like they can't reach out and talk to other people. And that really adds into like suicidality and people having a really hard time. It's obviously not necessarily the only thing that's going on for those people, but just having someone there is a real helpful protective factor. So if we can try to do a bit more of that, that can be really great. So it's really important not to just go straight into trying to fix it. It's really important to actually sit and listen to them and listen to what's kind of going on for them. So how do we do that? So we ask them directly about what's going on and how they're feeling. And it's really important that we ask directly about suicidal thoughts. So what is it, like, not just, oh, how are you feeling, or what's going on, or are you okay? Because people are programmed to say, I'm fine, or I'm good, thanks, how are you? Because we just ask that question all the time, and we don't necessarily want people to respond in any other way than I'm fine. I know that that won't be the case if you're asking a loved one this question, but that's what they're kind of used to answering and responding. And sometimes there's all of this kind of guilt or shame, or they don't want to hurt your feelings, or they don't want to upset you, or there can be lots of reasons why people might not be direct about it. So if you ask a vague kind of question about how you doing, they might not respond to that. They might not tell you, oh, well, I'm actually thinking about ending my life. That's why we need to kind of be able to ask these questions, which are really, really, really hard to ask. I ask people all the time, and sometimes I still feel uncomfortable asking it because it feels like it kind of comes out of the blue. It doesn't. So I know that there have been myths before about asking people about suicide and that making them suicidal. I can guarantee that's not the case. So I could ask you right now, are you feeling suicidal? And if you're not feeling suicidal, you'd be like, no. The same way that if you ask someone who's not feeling suicidal, they're never going to be like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. It's either something that your brain has thought about before or your brain has never thought about it before. And if your brain isn't thinking about it, even if it has thought about it before, it might not be thinking about it right now. But you wouldn't automatically go, oh, yes, I hadn't considered that. So yeah, that's why we encourage people to kind of ask the questions directly. So what we also want to be able to do is kind of show that we're paying attention. So making eye contact, nodding our head, like putting away distractions. So not having the TV on in the background if they're, depending on the age of the person and who you're talking to them, not having other things kind of going on around you, not trying to have a conversation with someone when there's there's kids around or other people around, that sort of thing that might make it kind of tricky for them to talk openly about what's kind of going on. So it talks about, also says reflect and clarify. So by that, like you don't, and like the video said, we don't have to have the answers to them. We don't have to know how to fix it, but we want to understand why they're feeling that way and really get a good idea of what's kind of going on for them. That might then lead us to some ideas about how we could help. But at that moment, what people normally need is for you to sit and listen and to kind of really process what they're saying and what's going on for them. So a good way of doing that is kind of going, oh, it sounds like you're saying this. Or if you're confused about it, like, I'm a bit, like, what do you mean by that? Those kinds of things, about really clarifying so you have a really good idea, because our brains have a tendency of going to worst case scenarios. So if we see someone self-harming, for instance, we think, oh God, they're going to end their life. Or like, for example, that's not necessarily why they're doing that. So it's good to kind of really understand what's going on for them and why they're feeling this way and what's going on. So if you find yourself responding emotionally, try, don't know what my point was there, sorry. But trying to, I guess, you're obviously going to feel very, like, a lot of emotions coming based on what people are kind of happening, like what they're saying, and it's never nice to hear someone say that they're thinking about ending their life. So also try not to put any judgments in, and try not to kind of finish what the person's saying or any of those sorts of things, which we can kind of do unintentionally sometimes, is kind of jump over people or be like, that's not the case, especially if they're talking about how they feel our relationship with them is impacting it, which could also be the case sometimes, especially if you're a parent and you're talking to a child or like maybe a sibling or something like that. They might have different ideas about what's happening. So just being aware of that and trying not to kind of jump on it and say, well, that's not true. Even if it maybe isn't true. It's, I guess, more about trying to focus on how they're feeling and what's going on for them, even if you feel that's not the case at all. It's really good to kind of listen and hear what's going on for them. It's really tricky to do sometimes. So what I have on this slide here is a list of key messages from the National Suicide Prevention and Media Campaign by Angela Nicholas from the Suicide Summit for 2020. So these are some of the things that they've done a lot of research on this, and what people who have been feeling suicidal, this is what they reported was really helpful for them. So people asking them how they are feeling, and then that listening without judgment. So just really, even if you don't know what to say, it's probably better to say, either say nothing or to say, I'm not really sure what to say about that, than coming in with something that might be judgmental or unhelpful. I'll get a little bit more into that in a minute. And just really listening to what it is about them that's important. Even if you think it's ridiculous that they had a fight with their friend and now they're feeling suicidal or whatever it might be, or you feel there's a lot of stuff going for them, just try to hold that. And recognize that that's your experience of it, but it's very different for them. And that might be something that has no effect on you and would never have an effect on you, but everybody's different. And you saying that, if someone was to say, so the hardest thing in your life has just happened to you and someone tells you that that's, oh, you're being silly or you're being ridiculous, imagine how you would feel in that situation. Even if it is a bit silly, that you can't help, they can't help the way that they're kind of feeling about that. So just kind of try to keep that stuff in mind. Ask about suicide, which we talked about before. So ask how you could help. So rather than going into that problem solving, if say someone's being bullied at school or being bullied at in their workplace, right, well, we're going to go in and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Just asking them, like, is there anything that I can do that would be helpful for you? And maybe just talking about it is enough to help them, prompt them to do stuff for themselves, or maybe they need your help with whatever it might be. It's really important to ask about a suicide plan and to ask specific questions about that. So by asking about a suicide plan, what we mean is specifically if they've got any access, if they've thought about how they would end their life and what they would use. And if they have thought about it, do they have access to whatever they have decided that they would use? Do they have they thought about when and where they would do it? Obviously, the more details they have around this stuff, the more concerned we should be. So if they have a vague idea about stuff and no access to things, then that would be somewhat of a lower risk, whereas you'd probably move into level 4 if they were giving you more detailed responses about things, or if they have access to things, that sort of thing. And what we want to do is, if they do have a plan, trying to help them dismantle it. But I'll get into that again in a little bit. So ask about means, which I just talked about. Talk to them about getting an appointment with a professional. So trying to encourage them to seek help, essentially. And so helping them go to the first appointment can be helpful as well. But again, that would be something that you would be asking them if they need. Obviously, if they're your child, that would probably be different to or younger child, I suppose, than if you're talking about one of your friends or an older adult. They might not want you to go. So try not to make assumptions about what you think people would need. Because we might have, we in that situation might really want someone to help, but we might not, that might not be their case. Or we might not want someone to help, but they might. And think about calling a crisis line, and I'll get into that again in a minute. So the things we really want to avoid is, and this is a really common response to when someone tells you that they want to end their life, is, oh, but you've got this going for you, or oh, well, you're really doing so well at this, or oh, you've got so many friends, or you've got, they might be telling you that they feel really alone and that they've got no one to support them, and you know that they've got all of these friends and all these other people, but it's about that feeling connected part of it, if that makes sense. So not necessarily that they don't have all of these people around them, but they might not feel like they can talk to anyone, or they can share their experience with anyone, which is really tricky then, because they don't feel that connection to people. So they might outwardly seem very popular or very connected to people, but they don't feel that connection. And people normally know those things as well. So if you're talking about, oh, but you've got such a good job, or whatever it might be, people are aware of those things. It doesn't make them not feel suicidal. There's the reasons that they're feeling suicidal that are outside of those those things that they might be really grateful for those things as well. It doesn't, just because someone's feeling suicidal doesn't mean that they're not grateful for their family and friends or their jobs or how much wealth they have or whatever else it might be. It just means that they're having a really hard time. Don't talk to them about, so this is the guilt kind of stuff that we're talking about, so not how much it will hurt their family and friends. I've never talked to a person that's suicidal that has relationships that hasn't considered the relationships and how they'll be impacted. People that feel, especially that are moving towards those later stages of on the levels, might feel like they're a burden on their family or their friends. So they might have these really close supportive relationships, but they feel like they're putting too much pressure on them. And I can't keep talking to my mum about feeling suicidal because she gets really upset and I can't do that anymore. So then I withdraw because I'm putting too much on her and it's making her upset, for instance. Those sorts of things that, like, people, they're aware of their relationships and those sorts of things, and it just makes them feel guilty, and that means they're more than likely not going to talk to you about it anymore. Trying to convince them that suicide is wrong, again, people are aware of why they maybe shouldn't end their lives, or why, like, that it doesn't stop the feelings and stop the thing just by someone making a comment about, oh, well, you shouldn't do that because that's a terrible idea, or that's wrong, or you'll go to hell, or whatever your own belief system kind of indicates. That doesn't solve any problems, and it just makes them, again, feel guilt or shame and try and solve problems, which we spoke about before as well. Cool. So yeah, we just want to be careful of things that make people feel guilty or isolated, or that might make them think, well, you're not a supportive person, I can't talk to you because you'll just bring up this stuff and make me feel even worse about what's going on. And this can have the unintentional side effect of making people feel even worse and pushing them more towards suicide as well. Again, like, you can see this coming from a really helpful place where they're just trying to, you just want to remind them, you just want to show them that things are kind of going okay, and that, like, there's all these people that love and care about you, but that's not necessarily how it's being communicated to them. Okay, so managing your own response. So people can respond in any different way when they hear someone, especially someone they love and care about, is suicidal. So it's completely normal to feel angry about it, to feel sad about it, to feel your own guilt or shame or anything really that comes up for you. That is a normal response because it's really hard to hear. So if you're going to ask someone, you need to be ready for them to kind of say yes. So again, I really emphasize it. It's important to practice doing this, and it's really helpful if you can do it with someone that will kind of help you with your responding and that sort of thing, because it's a hard thing to hear if someone says yes, and to know what to do after that and those sorts of things. So like with anything, it's good to practice it. So again, we've spoken quite a lot about that, feeling guilty stuff. Try not to criticize them, call them names, or punish. So I might talk to punishing a little bit more. So it's quite common when parents see, or even I guess with maybe friends or other family members, if you see someone doing that and your first response is kind of to panic yourself and get really upset, then you might be like, oh, well, you're feeling suicidal, so stop saying that. You need, like, well, you need to, I'm going to take your iPad off you, or I'm going to take your phone away from you, or I'm going to stop talking to you because you're being silly, or whatever it might be, because you're having such a big response to whatever they're saying. And that happens quite regularly. It's understandable in the sense that you're feeling very overwhelmed and you just want them to stop, and you think maybe that if they're on social media, then that's making it worse, or whatever it might be. Or I've heard people say things like, well, I don't want to reward the behaviour. Connecting with someone doesn't, isn't a reward. It's probably what that person needs. Obviously, if it's becoming unhelpful, then that might be something that you can get like professional intervention and help with. But really, don't punish someone. If you find someone self-harming, don't try not to punish them for it. It just creates the guilt and shame cycle, and they're more likely to kind of withdraw and not tell you anymore. And don't just ignore it. If you notice stuff's going on, that's how people will think, oh, well, no one cares. And I know that people get stuck in this, oh, well, they will come tell me if they need me. And I don't want to push them, and I don't want to do that, and like completely understandable again, but people won't necessarily come and tell you, and that can be because they feel like they've already put too much on you, and not because you're not loving and supporting, but because they're worried that they're putting too much stuff on you and they don't want you to feel responsible for them, which can be a big reason why people won't kind of come and talk to you. Okay, so responding to suicidal thoughts. So if someone's level 1, which is kind of that depression, sadness kind of thing, so I guess they wouldn't be in our model, they're not suicidal, but it's I guess asking them about support. What do they need, whether they want to get professional help, or whether it's just maybe they want things. Again, try not to decide what you think would be helpful for them, but what they would like to do. A lot of the time people go, oh, well, we'll just go out for coffee, or we'll just go and do this, or we should just do this, or you just need to get out of bed and we'll do this. But that might be not something that is helpful for that person. So trying to understand what would work for them. Maybe a big achievement for them is just getting out of bed and being able to sit on their couch rather than laying in their bed. If that's all they feel they can do, then maybe that's what you like, sit with them in their lounge room, for instance, that kind of thing. So level 2 is the passive thoughts. So kind of asking them, so that's when you're asking them about their suicidal thoughts and trying to assess yourself. So by assess, I mean asking them if they have a plan and that sort of thing. And if they don't have a plan, then again, asking them, well, is there anything that you can do just to help them and support them? Maybe starting to discuss therapy and other things. Obviously, any level of therapy is potentially going to be helpful, but some people might be reluctant for whatever reason. There can be lots of reasons. And I guess you'd want to be kind of checking in with them and seeing how they're doing and what they need from you at that kind of stage. Then we have level 3, which is the active planning. So if they have specific means, removing them, referral to other services, encouraging therapy, discussing support and safety planning to get worse, if things get worse. I will go through this in a little bit more detail, these kind of higher level ones. And then level 4, so that's when they've actually made a plan. So that's when we kind of want to deactivate the plan. So anything that we can do to try and keep them safe, we want to ask them if they're willing to help, like let us help diffuse a plan and get rid of it, and like support them to kind of keep themselves safe. If they're kind of telling you that they can't keep themselves safe or that you can't help them keep themselves safe, that's when we want to be calling an ambulance and getting other people involved. Or if their plan is really imminent, like they've said, yep, well, tonight I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. That kind of thing, that's when we really want to be moving. And then after suicidal behaviours, we want to be calling an ambulance and getting them, making sure they're getting support right away. Especially things like overdoses. So if people have ingested a substance and you don't know their thing, or if they've told you that they took an overdose a few hours ago or whatever it might be, it's still good to get medical support. So if you don't know straight away, then either having them monitored, or if it's been say 24 hours, then it's a good thing to kind of still get them checked out So maybe taking them to the GP, that sort of thing, because people, there are things that can kind of slowly break down, like your liver or your kidneys, for instance. So no matter what it is, if they've ingested multiples of a substance, unless you're a medical professional and know exactly how much they should have had, it's good to get like medical attention to make sure that it's all okay. Because there are things that are very, what's the word, very like lethal. So things like Panadol, for instance, are quite lethal. So a good thing to kind of keep in mind, and something that shouldn't be like something that you should be responding to straight away. So if they said that they've ingested more than the recommended amount of things, especially if that was an attempt to end their life as well, then we should be really responding to that. Okay, so yeah, cool. So then responding to self-harm. So the level 1, which is kind of the superficial, so kind of if they're scratching or like doing some of those other things that aren't leaving like scarring or anything like that. So we kind of just, that's when we're having these conversations about what's happening for them, and like why are they self-harming, trying to get them to maybe seek some support from other people, trying to help them come up with other solutions that they could probably do it in those times, and really managing our response in that as well. And then we have level 2, so which is the non-medical attention, but where there's like the skin is lacerated or there's an abrasion or something. So again, remaining calm, do perform like appropriate wound care, and then you want to do kind of the same sort of things as level 1. So trying to remain calm, but then like making sure you're taking care of the cut or the wound, and making sure that like it's being properly disinfected and that sort of thing. And then so level 3 is when it needs medical attention. So that's when you would kind of go to the ED or get an ambulance to try and stop the bleeding. So, and then again, like having the same conversations, but obviously the immediate need is to have the wound care looked after, to make sure that like things aren't getting infected, or if they need stitches, that's happening sooner rather than later. So you wouldn't be, especially if someone's hit an artery, obviously not going to be having these conversations right at that moment, but like I guess once that is like dealt with, and we're trying to have these conversations, trying to understand what's going on. So support options. So level 1 to 3 of feeling, so people feeling sad, having passive thoughts and having active thoughts. We would kind of really encourage people to build a relationship with their doctor. The MHTP stands for Mental Health Treatment Plan. So going and talking to your doctor about seeking professional support. They might have recommendations for people that you could see, or that your loved one might want to see. You can look up things online and see what kind of options there are for therapy interventions. There's also lots of online resources. So there's things like Headspace, Beyond Blue, Black Dog Institute. One of the local services that works with suicide is Grand Pacific Health. They have a program for 12 to 25-year-olds for like 6 weeks, just really managing kind of suicidal thoughts. So yeah, there's quite a few options that you can kind of go through and look at. I've put them in your handout as well and kind of explained it. So with your GP as well, you can also talk about potentially medication options if that's something that they're kind of interested in exploring. It might depend on how helpful that would be for that particular person. The psychologist will hopefully help with strategies around ways to help manage the suicidal thoughts or the self-harming. And so GPs are kind of, their job is to kind of gatekeep and liaise between services and help kind of manage if you have to see multiple different people for whatever reason, to try and make sure that all of that stuff is happening. It's also good to just, like we saw in the video about depression, that there is some chemical imbalances and other stuff. So it's good to know if there's any physical health things that might be contributing to or leading into kind of these suicidal thoughts or self-harming and that sort of stuff. So then we move into level 4, which is that active planning. So then there is the lines that you guys would probably know. So lifelines, the Kids Helpline could be another one on here, that we would kind of contact to help with maybe safety planning, depending on how comfortable you feel in making that safety plan with that person. Then there's options like the suicide callback service. So what they'll do is they'll call people back at a specific time just to kind of check in and see how they're going and that sort of thing, which can be really helpful. If the person is unable to keep themselves safe or isn't willing to try to put stuff in place, then that's when they need to kind of go to hospital and would probably be calling the ambulance. Just so you're aware, when you do call an ambulance for mental health, quite often the police will come as well. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, and maybe talk to your loved one about that as well, so that if you are calling an ambulance, that there is a potential that the police are coming, and that's not for any other reason than ambulance officers sometimes get attacked. So it's not got anything to do with your particular loved one, it's just what they do. To kind of keep ambulances safe and to, I guess, to have more people there to kind of help support if needed, depending on what's going on. That won't happen all the time, but it can happen. So just so you guys are aware. Okay, cool. And then, we already spoke about if someone has made an attempt, that we really want to be getting emergency services involved. There's also the poison information service there. So if they've ingested something and you don't know how lethal it is, and there's a reason that you don't want to go straight to the ED, or you're a bit concerned about that, then you can kind of contact them and they'll be able to tell you whether they think you need medical attention straight away or not. So that's an example of them. So I'll talk a little bit through if you do, so I mean, if you don't want to call an ambulance, you can also just take the person. So if they're willing to kind of go with you to the emergency department, then you could take them. You will have to wait, and sometimes it can be quite a while if you go to hospital. And then what they'll do is they'll kind of triage the person, assess whether they need to kind of be kept in overnight. The person doing that will normally be a mental health registered nurse or a psych registrar, and then they'll kind of make an assessment on whether that person can be kept safe. They'll hopefully do a bit of a safety plan if they then decide that they can be discharged. If they don't feel that they can be discharged, then they'll probably be admitted, and they'll be kept in hospital until they feel they can kind of keep themselves safe. And then that's when and they'll hopefully be discharge planning and other things with you, or with other loved ones, depending on your relationship to them, at the end of that. And then after hospital, they should hopefully get follow-up from something called the acute care team, and then they normally follow up within kind of 48 hours. But they also hopefully will talk to you about that in the hospital. Yeah, cool. So that's that information. So just before we move into that last part, I might ask if there's any questions, and if so, people pop them in. So if anyone's got any questions, if you want to just pop them in the chat box. Can everyone access the the handout that I sent. Try opening it, see if I can.
No, I haven't. Yeah.
So it's in the chat box up towards the top. If you want to go into there and have a look at it, hopefully everyone can access it.
Oh, I can't see where to access it.
So if you scroll towards the top, oh, it's acting a bit weird. Oh, there we go. All right, cool. So it has all of the, for those of you finding it tricky, I'll put it on. No, it's not loading now. So if you scroll right back up to the top of the chat box and then scroll down a little bit, there should be something that says handout.
Okay, got the chat box up. And yeah, got it.
Ah, lovely. All right. What I'll do is I'll just quickly share you guys and show you what it looks like. It's gone a bit odd, but anyway, I shouldn't have done that. So it just goes through, hopefully yours looks a bit different to this. I don't know why it's gone like this, but it goes through the conversation signs, like those physical and behavioural signs that someone might not be doing so well, and then how to respond to each level of and I don't know why the arrows are there, they shouldn't be, but anyway, each level of like if someone's feeling suicidal. So that's there, but if you still want the slides as well, just let me know. Oops. All right, cool. So if there's no further questions at the moment, I'll go into the last little bit, which is talking about looking after ourselves. Right. Cool. So the last part is kind of self-care. So looking after ourselves. So it's really, really, really difficult to be having these conversations with people and to be feeling like, I guess, yeah, having people that are not doing very well at all. So what I've got here is this is a cup metaphor. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of this, but what it kind of talks about is everybody has a cup, and it's can only be filled by things that we do that kind of look after us and make us feel good, and that we kind of enjoy. And if you're looking after other people, you're pouring things from your cup into their cup because that's doing things that make them feel better. But if we pour too much stuff out of our own cup into someone else's cup, or into multiple different things, this could be lots of things take away from our cup, things like working, children, like relationships, all of these things take our time and our energy and our concentration. And some of them can also fill up our cup a little bit, but some of them might not always, depending on what's kind of going on. So we need to do things that kind of look after ourselves, because otherwise we can't help other people. We can't give something when you don't have anything left to give. So it's really important to kind of fill your own cup first, and to think about yourself and what you need from these situations. So it's good to kind of focus on what you need. So I've got some examples of pictures and stuff there. So like, can be like going out with friends. It can be going out for coffee. It can be doing like creative things. It can be having a glass of wine or a beer or whatever it might be. It can be like doing creative things. It can be going for a walk out, going out in nature. It can be spending time with your loved ones. It can be lots of different things. It could be reading. It can be none of those things as well. It looks different for everyone. If exercising isn't your thing, there'll be stuff that you kind of like doing. So it's good things to kind of think about, what do you need to be doing that's kind of helpful for you, that you can kind of focus on, or is good for you to kind of spend time doing. So can people just pop into the chat box some of the things that they like to do? What I'll do is I'll send the attachment through to I'll send it through to everybody as well. That might be easiest if you can't kind of get onto it. Cool. So going out in nature, excellent. What else do people like to do? Going on long walks, lovely. Reading in the bath, going to the beach, running, wine, walking, lovely. Coffee, books, fishing, beach walking, lovely. Playing with your dog, that's a good one. Cycling, yep, excellent. Support groups, also excellent examples. Getting your own therapeutic support can be really great too if you feel like you need that. And depending on who you're supporting, that might be a really good idea, because it can be really, really tricky. Hanging out with your partner, excellent. Doing dates and other things. Laughing on Facebook, looking at memes on Facebook, whatever it might be, that's a good one. Cool. So really anything that makes you feel good or feel better, or kind of helps you chill out, or whatever you need to do. Some people like to be busy, and it's just being really organized that helps them. I don't know, it depends. Gardening, support groups, lovely. Yeah, so just have a think about some of those things that really help you, especially if you are have people around you that aren't doing so well too, because it's just tricky all the time, not having other people around, or can be good to kind of get your friends and family involved. Where did it go? There we go. So if you've got other friends or family members, they can be really good to kind of like support you, depending on who it is in your household, like talking to other people about what's going on or how it's affecting you, especially because I know I spoke a lot about trying to maintain your own response and that sort of thing, and that's really hard to do when it's someone you really care about. So if you can have other people in there kind of supporting you while you're supporting them, that can be really good too. Yeah, lovely. Cool. So I already asked the questions and then it didn't seem like anything. So thank you very much. Just before we finish up, if anyone wants to kind of put it in the chat, or feel free to email me afterwards if there's anything that you would kind of like to know more about, or anything that wasn't particularly clear, or that would be kind of helpful for you to know, please let me know. I'm more than happy to try and explain things better or do anything differently. But thank you all for attending. And if you know people that couldn't attend and you think it might be helpful for them to have this information, then just let me know and I can, because we've been recording, and I'll try and send it through. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, guys, and I hope you all have a lovely day.